Thank you so much for being here this evening with us after a long day. We're really excited to share with you some content that we've prepared that help you get a glimpse into what it means to us to be a responsive school and how you can partner with us to support the social emotional learning and the well-being of your child. We're excited to get started. And so thanks to everyone for joining. And if you're watching this later, we are recording so that people who were not able to join this evening will have a chance to see this presentation later. So thanks also to those of you who are joining that way. My name is Ilsa Dohmen. I'm the Director of Teaching and Learning, and I'm going to let the other presenters introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Amy Hand. I'm the head of middle school. And I also wanted to invite families who are here to feel free to turn your video on, unless, of course, you're not comfortable with that, which there may be many good reasons for. But it can help us sometimes to see how people are responding to things. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Genna Lyons, and I am the school counselor at Hillbrook.
Hello, I'm Kelly Scholten, and I'm the associate head of lower school. Thanks for being here tonight.
All right, and of course you all are here to find out what are some of the core beliefs that we hold as a responsive school. How do these translate into the classroom? So what does that look like in our practice as educators with your children, JK to 8, inside the classroom, on the recess playground, all the spaces in between? How does Hillbrook explicitly teach emotion awareness and regulation? We'll talk about some ways that we do that. What do we do when students make a mistake? How do we respond? And then hopefully tonight you'll also get a glimpse into some language and strategies that you might be able to also use with your child outside of school. And we've prepared also a lot of videos for you tonight so that you'll really get a chance, I think, to kind of glimpse into the classroom and see what these look like. So let's get started. A core belief of responsive schools is that kids do well when they can. We love this quote of Dr. Ross Green's. It reminds us that when we see a child not being successful in some sort of social, emotional, or interpersonal way, that just like with any other skill, whether it's subtracting decimals or reading, we can step in and teach them the skills that they don't have yet, so that hopefully they can get to a place where they can take really good care of themselves, they can be really great community members, and they can seek, build, and then maintain the kinds of social relationships that they want to have with their peers. And all of this is in service when we talk about teaching explicitly children to have the skills. What skills are we talking about? Throughout JK to 8, the skills that we're teaching your children really boil down to this CARES acronym. So the C is for cooperation. The next one is assertion. We want children to be able to self-advocate and speak for what they need. Responsibility, so taking responsibility for something maybe that you've done, but also showing responsibility proactively for something that you hope will be the case in your community. Empathy. And then the S is for both self-regulation and self-awareness. And as we show you some of these strategies, I think you'll see the ways that each of these shows up in the youngest grades, the middle grades, and then up through 8th grade. So some of the core beliefs of being in a responsive school. The first one is that the way we teach children, how we teach them, is as important as what we are teaching them. So we know that kids learn from our communication and our own regulation, and that they're always looking to us for cues.
Another core belief is that critical cognitive growth occurs through social interaction. We are social learners, and social interaction is, as we all know, complex. So we know that engaging in this interaction helps us become more sophisticated in our understanding of dynamics, of nuanced communication, and of subtle cues. So we know that just as with adults, it's also true that when kids practice this, they get better at it.
The next one is the belief that the way adults partner to create an inclusive community is as important as their individual contributions to that community. So all of us, families, educators, are working together to create that pro-social environment and to share that message with children of what we expect, of the ways that we know that they can learn and achieve their hopes and dreams, and of the ways that we're going to take care of them when they make mistakes or when they need help with something.
And the last two, what we know and believe about students informs our expectations, reactions, and attitudes. And partnering with families is as important as knowing the children we teach. We know that you as parents are the experts on your own kids. What we bring as educators and people who have worked with kids for a long time in groups is an understanding of child development, educational pedagogy, best practices for kids, and an understanding of how kids tend to behave in groups, not just when they're alone or at home with their family. So we think that bringing these understandings together and partnering together creates a really positive synergy that allows us to serve kids best.
And of course, all of this are the ways that we at Hillbrook know, respect, and value individuals and create that experience that's in our mission where every day is a journey of self-discovery, imaginative thinking, creative problem solving, laughter, and friendship. So now we're going to talk about what does this look like in practice. So as we're trying to teach children these care skills, what are some of the strategies that we're using on our campus? And each of these that we're about to name is going to have a section of the presentation where you'll get to see some videos and some more explanation. But this is a summary of the strategies that we're going to talk about. So one is interactive modeling. Another is looking at language. We'll take some time to talk about reminders, redirection, and logical consequences, interactive learning structures, and then age-appropriate choice and autonomy. And the first one is interactive modeling.
So a large part about being a responsive school is creating safe and predictable learning environments where students are explicitly taught routines and procedures and social skills. Rather than assuming kids know what we expect, we use a tool called interactive modeling to help students create clear, positive mental images of what's expected of them. They do know the noticing themselves, which builds up their powers of observation and their analysis and communication skills. In addition, because they get immediate practice, they gain quicker expertise and stronger mastery of the procedure or skill being taught. Interactive modeling starts with the adult modeling the routine, but then extends beyond that, as we'll see here in a moment in a video. It actively involves the children in naming the model behaviors and then in practicing these behaviors while the teacher watches and provides feedback in real time. So we'll have a chance to watch this in action, interactive modeling in action, in a second grade classroom.
You may notice the videos are a little on the quiet side, so you may have to turn your volume up in a moment when it starts.
What should it look like? Watch what he does, because then we're going to ask you, what did you notice? All right, what should it look like? What did you notice? What did you notice, Mason?
I noticed that he didn't leave anything behind.
Ah, beautiful, showing responsibility.
And he sat down.
And he sat down quickly. What else, Zoe?
He was cleaning up, and right after he cleaned up, he didn't do anything extra. He just sat right down.
Beautiful. That is showing self-control. Okay. How should our bodies be, Grayson, as we're coming down here? Can you show us? There, he's cleaned up. He's looking around. Where am I going to sit? Did you see that? Thumbs to your heart if you think you are ready to go and try cleaning up and getting down there in 2 minutes. I could not have done that better. How did that feel? How did it feel? How did it feel, Ashton?
It felt great.
It felt, what made it feel great?
Like just sitting down here, not having to do much, just listening.
It's just calming, right? How about you, Haley?
It was very calm, not much people would talk. You know, also Sana, you could sit there if you want more space.
Very responsible of you. Yeah, nice and calm. And guess what? You still still had time left.
Wow.
That was great. Charlie, did that feel good to you? Because now we're all down here ready to go.
So as you saw there, interactive modeling includes a moment there at the end to reflect and celebrate the positive impact that learning this new routine has on the learning community.
Something as I've learned to do interactive modeling too since joining Hillbrook that has never ceased to amaze me is how much children are willing to and actually enjoy watching an adult or a peer do something that seems very simple, like put things in a box and then sit on the carpet and talking together about what that looked like and how it felt.
What should it?
So the next strategy that we pay a lot of attention to, and this is something we really could talk the full hour about, is adults' language. So we know that language shapes every interaction we have. The way we frame our thinking and our questions creates the container that children are then going to fill with their responses. And so we're always thinking about ways to improve our language, ways to make it more precise and purposeful. And we're always endeavoring to be very clear with children. And also to not speak sometimes when speaking gets in the way of their thinking and processing. There's all different ways that we think about the types of language to make it fit the purpose that we have. But in general, we're looking to have a bias towards language that encourages thinking versus knowing or just getting the right answer in children, that looks for depth over superficial responses, and that prompts a growth mindset and increasing independence. And so here's one example of a type of language that I might be choosing between as I think about what I'm going to say to a child. We use both imperative and declarative interactions with children depending on the purpose that we have. So on the one hand, if I am hoping to invite an interaction with a child and to have them do the thinking, which then of course leaves open the possibility that they may have lots of different possible responses, I might say something declarative to them like, looking around the classroom, I wonder how we could figure out what subject we have next. Or if I'm wanting them to prompt some social thinking, I might say, oh, Jill is leaving. And in both of those cases, I'm inviting children to engage in thought about their environment and about what they want to do about it, and potentially to interact with me. And of course, that can be really helpful for their learning. And also for me, sometimes to find out things that children are thinking that are very different from what I expected. Another piece, though, of being responsive, on the other hand, is sometimes it's really important if I do have a specific outcome in mind, or I want children to have a specific action or response, to use imperative language. That's language that is very direct. It expects a certain response, and it gives children that really clear and concise message about what we expect them to do next. So different from saying, I wonder how we could figure out what subject is next. I might say, take out your math notebook. If that's the expectation that I have of a group of children during math class. Or instead of saying, oh, Jill is leaving, I might say goodbye to Jill if I intend to prompt the social action and not necessarily have children think their way through that. We also are really explicitly along the way then helping children learn to use their language purposefully and with the kind of impact that they intend. And at every age group, we're talking with children really specifically about language, and are often using stories, scenarios, and role play, which create this kind of protective buffer for them, because then as a group we can look in on a set of characters to talk about how they're speaking and acting in a tricky social situation, to reflect on how the language and actions of others affects their emotional state, both for the character whose perspective we're taking and then for the other characters who are involved. And then to problem solve as a group, what other kinds of language could we have used, what other kinds of actions. So let's see, this is a video of kindergartners who are reading a story and then doing some scenarios with one another about language.
This story. Has anybody ever heard this one? Being frank. Here we go. Frank was always frank. Honesty is the best policy. Has anybody ever heard that? Being honest is the best. Your singing is really shrieky. Frank told Carol, and Carol stomped away. Are those kind ways to tell people what you're thinking? Okay, pause. How do you feel inside now? Oh, could you imagine being talked to like this? Would not make me feel happy. Carol said, I am not riding the Ferris wheel with you. You made me feel bad with your words. Everyone was upset, and now guess who wasn't happy? Frank. Yeah, I've got one coming up. But what am I going to say to Bob? It's really bothering me, and I don't want to flip my
Can
leg.
you please stop? Taking your pencil.
You are on the money, man. On the money. Kiss your brain, like Miss Collins says. Yeah. So there's a way that we can talk to our friends, having a nice tone, being honest, but not being so honest
Go like this.
that we make our friends feel sad, mad, scared, and worried. All right, Caleb Asper, our fallen one. Get to someone. So Mrs. Richards is outside playing. She and Chloe are playing together. And Charlotte comes up. And Charlotte's looking sad. And we say, Charlotte, would you like to play with us? And Charlotte goes, yeah, I really like to. How is she going to feel?
Happy.
Happy. Calm. Preston.
Happy.
Happy. No matter how you talk to your friends, especially if it's kind of not so nice, you always have an opportunity to repair it. Always, always, always. And if you don't think you can repair those conversations by yourself, what do you call?
The teacher.
The teacher. Exactly. That's
So you can see here, even with kindergartners, we're talking about different emotional states and thinking about how we can both be candid and honest with friends and with teachers and with other people we share community with, but also have the kind of impact and create the kinds of relationships that we want, even when self-advocating.
this story. Has anybody ever heard this one?
So on this slide, you'll see a few visuals that are taken from lower school and middle school classrooms around routines and procedures and classroom norms. So as teachers have laid these foundations to build a positive community, they use reinforcing, reminding, and redirecting language to help give children feedback throughout the day. So I'll go a little bit more in depth for each of those categories. Reinforcing language really gives children specific descriptions of what they're doing well towards a goal. So for example, instead of saying, nice job, when kids have put away items in the morning, reinforcing language would name, I see all the backpacks and coats have been put away neatly. Another example in an academic context would be, instead of saying, great work with your note taking, reinforcing language would be more like, I see that you wrote the main ideas in your own words and you carefully noted where you got the information. So reminding language, the second one, prompts children to pull up from their memory of established expectations, and often using sometimes the visuals that you see here. This supports children in pausing and visualizing what to do before they take action. So one type of reminding language can be phrased like a question, what could you do to solve that problem? Or once you're finished testing your structures, what do you do next? These directly prompt children to think about what they know. And other reminders can be more in the form of a statement, like, I'm looking for children to complete their reflections. Or sometimes they start with a think about, like, think about what will help you have a peaceful and joyful recess time. So ideally, we spend most of our time reinforcing positive behaviors and giving reminders that prompt students to recall the plan for the group. But there are times, however, when we simply need to redirect with clear instructions when children have gone off track. And often these redirections can be effective when naming the desired behavior. So like, it's time to listen instead of no talking right now, or stop, wait to hear the directions instead of why are you moving before we've gotten to the directions? Next slide. So in a moment, we're going to watch two examples, one from a middle school classroom and one from a kindergarten classroom, where teachers are weaving together, reinforcing, reminding, and redirecting language into class discourse. So we'll go ahead and watch the first one.
I know that's hard, especially today because it's warm and it's just before spring break. Close your device, please, Finn. And we are tired, I know that, but I'm going to ask you to be your best, do your best. And if you have any questions, please do ask me. I am here to give you that assistance. All right, it is independent work time now. You may open your devices. And those of you who are at a distance may work independently now.
And then the kindergarten.
That's right. Okay, this morning I want to teach you a new greeting. I thought we could do, I haven't done this one in a long time, but I said, oh, I need to teach you guys. It's kind of a fun one. It's called a jellyfish greeting. Yesterday we were talking a lot about sea animals, and I said, oh, I don't think I've taught them the jellyfish greeting. So, oh, you're interrupting. Remember, if you have something to say, raise your hand. So I want to show you how to do the jellyfish greeting. So what you're going to do is you're going to take one hand, put it out, and
So you can see there that the teachers artfully wove together the reinforcing, reminding, and redirecting language into what they were doing. Now, sometimes a redirection is followed by a logical consequence, with the goal being to stop the misbehavior while helping children really see and take responsibility for the effects of their actions. Logical consequences are different from punishment in that, unlike punishment, logical consequences have three things. They're relevant, which means directly related to the misbehavior. They're realistic, which is something that a child can reasonably be expected to do and the teacher can manage with a reasonable amount of time and effort. And then, of course, they're respectful, which communicated kindly and focused on the misbehavior itself and not the child's character or personality. So for example, suppose Chloe scribbles all over her desk. Having her clean the desk would be relevant, realistic, and a respectful logical consequence. Conversely, having her miss recess would be irrelevant, or having her clean every desk in the classroom after school would be unrealistic amount of work. And really the uncleanliness of the other kids' desks is unrelated to Chloe's mistake. When we're thinking about logical consequences, they usually fall into three categories. The first being you break it, you fix it, which is like the earlier example with the desk. The second is loss of privilege, where children are given a temporary break from something until they have a moment to review the expectations around it and demonstrate that they're ready to try again. And then the final type is positive timeout or take a break, where children have the opportunity to reset and then rejoin when they're ready. And so we're going to look a little bit more at the take a break idea. So we're going to watch an explanation from 3rd through 8th graders explaining take a break, but to frame it a little bit, it gives children really the opportunity to practice strategies that they've learned in their classrooms for regaining self-control. Because many children have experienced punitive forms of timeout, it's important to distinguish that in this setting, take a break simply gives us time and space that we all sometimes need to get ourselves regulated when we begin to kind of feel out of control. And so we'll watch a collection of students explaining what take a break is for them.
Take a break is basically where if you feel like maybe stressed or something, you can go over there and just take a little break. You should know like that it's like you should know when you need to take a break. If you're like starting to be like getting out of control, that's a good time to like raise your hand and ask if you can take a break or something like that.
Maybe if you have a lot of energy, you might go outside to like recenter yourself and make sure you can pay attention in class. And you could also go to take a break, like if you're being very disrespectful or disruptive and you just need to reset.
If you get angry or upset, then you just gotta you can't just go on doing something. You get frustrated, you get even more upset. You gotta take a break, stop what you're doing, and do nothing. Just lay or take breaths.
And you might want to take a break yourself if you came back from recess and you're excited and you're sweating and you just might want to take a little break before you go into the class mode.
You sit down and try to calm yourself. Sometimes there are like little fidgets that you can fidget around with.
For me, taking a break is stepping outside to make sure I'm focused and ready for class.
Just like regulate, like maybe do some of this breathing, figure eight breathing or square breathing or something like that. And like basically that's what you want to do.
For me, taking a break is taking a small walk outside to de-stress.
For me, taking a break is standing at the practical classroom and just taking a couple of breaths to regain focus.
And like when you feel calm and you're like done and you feel calm, just like come back. And then you can go back to whatever you're doing that moment.
So that you can be helpful and not hurtful to the class.
So this is a great tool for kids to learn. And it's one that I think as adults, many of us realize taking a break can be really helpful. Sometimes we need to walk away from something. Sometimes we need to come back later. And so we're trying to teach that really explicitly to kids. And it does evolve in ways that respond to kids' development throughout middle school. I think what you'll find is that on average, kids are taking fewer breaks in 8th grade than they were in 2nd grade because they have better skills with regulating their own emotions and bodies. And what you'll also find is that in the middle school, it's more common practice for kids to recognize that they need their own break. And so they'll initiate that themselves rather than always relying on a teacher to initiate. So we see those skills and that awareness of self evolving in ways that is really healthy.
Take a break.
Oh. Okay. So we wanted to talk about the ways that we're responsive, not just in terms of fixing problems with kids, but also in ways that feel really positive. So one of the things we do is we try to be really intentional about designing learning experiences that respond to student feedback and interest. This is a way that we are literally responsive to what we hear from kids and what they care about. So you'll find that with, for instance, RBB, Reach Beyond Week experiences, electives, we not only allow choice and allow kids to express their preference for what they would like to participate in, but we also solicit ideas from them, which guide the offerings that we plan for them. We also, there are many examples of this in English class. We have a balance of shared class reads that kids can participate in, but we also have smaller book groups where kids have choice in what they read. So this comes up not just with the more electives oriented offerings, but also in all of our academic classes, especially in the middle school. We also value not just choice about what content kids are pursuing, but also about how they're learning that content. So it's not uncommon in different classes when it makes sense for teachers to offer students a choice between working alone on some things or working with a partner for some things. They don't always get that choice, but when it makes sense and when the learning outcomes can be achieved in various ways, we do like to offer that. Let's see, there's also, it's good practice for kids to get a menu of options if they're learning something. If a kid is responding to a certain poem, for instance, a teacher might say, okay, here are your options for how you choose to respond to this. You can do a journal entry, you can write a song, you can write a poem in response. So when we see that opportunity to offer authentic learning and authentic choice, we provide it. Another way in which we're responsive is by giving students opportunities to respond themselves to what they see and care about in the world. We want kids to understand that like adults, we know that they're seeing what's happening in the world around them and that they benefit when they have meaningful opportunities to engage in that. So when there's, for instance, big news or big events in the world, we'll show them that we're taking a pause from what the business as usual may have been planned for that day and giving them time to process that, which might be what they need emotionally or socially when events are fresh or when events feel really big. And last but not least, offering agency in the structures of their school day. One of my favorite problems to have is too many petitions from middle schoolers. I see parents of some of those petitioners here today, whether it's about dress code or whether it's about how long lunch period is or whether it's about getting breaks in between classes, not just at recess. We really listen to students, and when their requests are reasonable and thoughtful, and when we know that they'll be served well from responding to those requests, we do our best to honor them. Oh, I didn't speak about Gregoire. Ilsa, do you want to share why we, you may be wondering why we have a picture of a bird for this slide. Ilsa can probably do a better job of explaining than I can.
Absolutely. I was recently observing in an 8th grade class, and I walked in to see probably the most middle school thing I've ever seen, which is on the whiteboard. There is a front page news headline article the children have been looking at, magneted to a list of bird names. So they had been brainstorming. This pair of mourning doves is nesting directly above the door to their classroom, and a student spied it one day walking in. The bird seems relatively unperturbed to be positioned where it is, despite being like very close to the entrance. And so the children have named the bird and are now brainstorming names for the bird's chicks when they hatch. And all of this was just together with also a wish list of recess equipment items that they are planning. I don't know if it'll be a petition, but I suspect that Amy will be getting a letter about their preferences.
And these ways of being responsive in a positive way, as you know, really matter to kids. It shows them that we care about their feelings, we care about their agency at school, and we're not just handing down imposing structures on them. We're listening to them, and we care about their engagement and their happiness at school.
So the ability to recognize our own emotional triggers and regulate our bodies in response to those emotions is a skill that's we benefit from our entire lives. And we start teaching this as early as JKK, and this continues through 8th grade in the middle school. What's interesting about teaching emotional awareness and self-regulation is that the learning objectives actually stay pretty much constant as kids grow up, but because of their developmental stages, we shift the way that we teach it. So the best way to really illustrate that is to just mention, if you see a kindergartner who's like stomping her feet and yelling because she didn't get the marker color that she wanted, we would sort of pass that off as being like pretty typical for a 5-year-old. In 3rd or 4th grade, we might wonder, is something going on with that child today? Is something going on at home? And then if you were to see that with an 8th grader, that would really raise some red flags for us, right? So we shift our expectations based on the developmental age of the child. So in the lower school, we're really focused on helping children learn and name the language around emotions. And then we try to pair those emotions with the physical sensation associated with them in their body. So we might see a child fidgeting in their chair and say like, you're looking like you need to move your body. I wonder if you're feeling frustrated. And we sort of pair those two things together for them. And then as they get older, we start to identify any triggers that they may have, and then determine tools for their toolbox to manage their zone, which is related to the curriculum that we use. So if you have a child in lower school, you may have heard them talking about the zones of regulation. This is a metacognitive curriculum that we use to help teach these skills. It's color coded, and each color is representative of a psychological state of alertness, where green is sort of our highest state of alertness. We're most regulated and most able to engage and learn. Blue is where we're understimulated. Yellow is like getting into an agitated state, and red would be the most distressed, where we're really not capable of learning and socializing in an effective way. By middle school, kids are really wanting to know the why. Why does my body respond to stress this way? Why do I feel, nervous for a test? Why do my palms get sweaty? And we start teaching them, the science, what's happening in their brain, what is the stress response, and why do stress management strategies that have been drilled into them for so long, like we heard Jackson talking about the figure 8 breathing or square breathing, why do they work? What happens in our body when we do that? As kids get older, they're navigating a much more complex and nuanced social world. And therefore, we need to adjust the way that we talk about things and talk about social media, for example, as they get older. I'm going to take you through some examples. We're going to start with the color coding and then kind of go clockwise. So this was an activity done during distance learning with 3rd and 4th graders. You'll see in the top right corner, this 3rd grader was placing different emotions into which zone they felt it belonged in. And not every student will put things like, for example, silly and wiggly into the yellow zone. It might be different for everybody. This child put confused between yellow and red. So this was just a good exercise for them to kind of, what do I feel each of these emotions for me belongs in? And then as we learn more, you can see down in the lower right corner, a 4th grader we're breaking down the zone and what does it feel like physically? So what would you see? What would I be doing when I'm in the blue zone? What does it sound like when I'm in the blue zone? And what does it feel like? And so this child broke that down with some drawings and words. And then as we move to the bottom left, in this activity, you can't see those are buttons. And the 4th graders were asked for examples of what pushes their anger button, what really makes them mad. And so this is where they're starting to explore what their triggers are. And of course, everybody is different and has different triggers. And then as we move up to the top left, they were asked if they were going on a trip and they could only bring things that could put them in the green zone, what would they bring along with them? And so here we are exploring what are their tools for their toolbox and really bringing to light for them so they can think through like, oh yeah, drawing flowers does make me feel better. So that when they have one of those triggers and they feel themselves in that zone, they have those strategies at their fingertips. We did a lesson with middle school students around self-regulation and awareness. And they were first prompted to think about how does your body show you that you're stressed? What are the physical things that happen inside your body? And you can see that they all had a different take, but we can probably all relate to a lot of these ourselves. And then this is a clip of me teaching this lesson. It was a long lesson, so you'll see a lot of different pieces of it. What might be happening in this kid's brain and body in this picture? What's happening in her prefrontal cortex, her amygdala, and her hippocampus? Like we were just saying, your amygdala isn't perfect and it doesn't really make a distinction between what's a real threat and what's not. So you might have a reaction to like a math test, right? Or you might freeze up during a test, or you might run away from a social situation that feels uncomfortable. That would be that flight reaction. Or you might argue with a friend if we're really nervous about something else. So your body is in that fight mode. And it's important to know that what happens when you respond to stress is that we're really responding before our prefrontal cortex has any time to think about what it is that would be helpful in the situation. So the $1 million question is, how do we go from angry or stressed or frustrated to calm? And if we have these in mind and we're more in control, we can be less reactive. And we can use our prefrontal cortex more, we will be more at ease and less distressed. So that is the question. So we're going to answer it today. And the vagus nerve is stimulated by deep breathing, humming, singing. It has like a little in the back of your throat. That's what stimulates the vagus nerve. A lot of relaxation practices, they have you hum or you do deep breathing, or sometimes singing can be part of like a mantra. And all of that is because it is soothing and calming, and it starts to stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system. So all these pictures of things you see, these are all things that can help stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system. What might be happening in this kid's brain?
I really cannot figure out the correct way to advance the slide without replaying the video at the end. I'm trying.
That's okay. We're all learning. Great. So we wanted to talk also about, we talked earlier, sorry, I don't have a neat segue between that slide and this one. Earlier, we spoke about how we respond to student mistakes, and we did want part of our program for tonight to focus on what happens when kids make bigger mistakes. That's going to be part of their healthy development. It's something we know happens with younger students and also with middle schoolers. And we do consider mistakes that cause others harm in its own special category that warrant a special response, and a response that takes into account the feelings of others. So the structure that we use for that, this is not in place of anything that we've already discussed, but this is an overlay that acknowledges that sometimes our mistakes really have a more profound effect on others. And this is what we introduce when that occurs. So we do use a way of thinking about this, an approach called restorative discipline. You might have also heard this called restorative justice or restorative practices. We use all of those terms interchangeably. So if you look at I like this diagram on the left side. If you imagine these two axes that represent how schools can think about their approach to discipline. One axis is, are you like the degree to which you're very caring? So you can have a high caring school or a low caring school institution. And then in terms of structure, you can have a very high structure school or a very low structure school. So clearly being low on both of those axes would be neglectful. But you can also have a lot of structure without a lot of caring. And that is a punitive environment that we are trying actively to avoid. You can also have high caring with not enough structure. And that's when you would have an environment that's too permissive. What we're trying to combine at Hillbrook in the restorative method is a high caring and high structure approach, so that students feel that there is accountability and responsibility for actions in the context of caring for ourselves, caring for others, and caring for the values of our environment. So it's often helpful to contrast what we sometimes think of as a more traditional approach to discipline with the approach that restorative practices incorporate. So in a traditional discipline, kind of the old school approach, a lot of the thought following a student mistake would be given to what punishment should the student get, what does the student who made the mistake, like all of the attention would be on that child. It would often be entirely past oriented. So there would be a lot of time spent thinking about what happened already, what happened in the past, getting the details about like whose fault was it or who started it established. That would be more of the focus. With restorative practices, the attention is paid equally to the student or person or people who were harmed when there's been a negative interaction. It would also be growth oriented. How do we move forward and share community together? And how do we allow conversation to occur that's focused on how each person was impacted by the experience? Next slide, please. So often what will happen is that after there's a conflict that we learn about, that we'll have something called a restorative circle. So in a restorative circle, the person who was harmed, and often, a lot of times we refer to a student who was harmed and then the other student, often, not always, but often it's much more complex than that. A lot of mistakes happen in a dynamic where there may be multiple students harmed, or maybe somebody did one thing that harmed another, and then the other person did something that was harmful back, and not always, of course, to equal degrees. So we do try to acknowledge the nuance there and the complexity, and we allow people to share how an incident or event affected them. So in that kind of conversation, which is always mediated by an adult, each person gets a chance to express what they did, how they felt after, how they were affected by the other person. And then this is this is one of the most important parts. They also get a chance to express what they're hoping for from the other person moving forward. So sometimes what students ask for is an apology. Sometimes they ask for space. Sometimes they ask for, sometimes we've gone through this process with kids who are good friends, and they say, I want to continue being friends with you, but I don't want you to joke about X, Y, or Z. So they get experience and practice establishing boundaries and articulating boundaries for themselves and expectations of peers and or friends. And we are going to get to see part of this in action.
So what you'll see here in a moment are some clips from a restorative circle that our middle school dean of students is running with a group of middle school children. Sorry.
They don't care.
And just for context, what's happened before the circle that you're about to see is that the dean here, Laura Hale, has met with each child directly involved one-on-one. And part of the hope of those pre-meetings is for her to assess whether or not this is the kind of interaction that could benefit from face-to-face restoration. So in this case, she's done that work and decided with those all of those people involved that it is. And so we'll watch, and then you can read what will happen after the circle.
Restoration means to make a repair or an improvement. And our restorative circle today has some ground rules, and I want to go over them with you. So refrain from saying so-and-so or he or she or they. I want you to speak your own truth from your own perspective, and it is your turn. The first question is, from your perspective, what happened? And then what were you thinking at the time? Not in this moment, but when it happened, what were you thinking? And then how are you feeling now? And then what is the hardest thing for you about this situation? And lastly, I want you each to think about who has been impacted by this situation. Who has been affected? I'm clear that you've been affected. Has anyone in your family been affected by this? What do you feel you need for this situation to be resolved? And do I understand you're asking for the group not to talk about one another and create drama? Give me thumbs up if that seems like something that you can honor, that you can, yeah, okay, great statement. We're sixth graders. It's a part of our learning and the way we socialize with one another that conflict arises. So maybe just honoring that with putting into the plan, hey, let's talk about something else when it comes up. Thanks for that. The team has really good ideas. What I'm going to do is take what I've heard and I'm going to actually put it in a plan writing. It's going to include not talking about one another's pasts, not talking about one another if possible. And if that happens, some ways, some strategies to stop the behavior so that we don't cause harm. I want to follow up with all of you as a group in about 1 week's time to see how our plan is working for us, to see if we need to make any adjustments. Does this sound like we're on the right track? Great.
So you saw there, without the benefit of being able to watch students interacting with each other, obviously for privacy reasons, that's why there's some black masking on the video, that Laura is moving students through these different phases of sharing and helping them hear from one another and then create a plan moving forward for how they would like to be in community with each other ongoing.
And I would just add one other thing to that that's written in the slide. There is always communication with families when there's an event of this magnitude. And this process also does not preclude the possibility that a separation from the community, whether it's for a certain class until things are resolved, or whether it's for an afternoon at school or even a day, if it's really serious or if safety is involved, it doesn't preclude any of those other consequences from occurring. We just believe that this is a really important part of that process when kids make mistakes that are hurtful.
Restoration means to make a I
don't think it's possible. All right, this is our closing slide. We thank you so much for spending your evenings with us. We hope that you were able to see that we believe children are always watching us and learning from the community and the culture that we've created at school, that we are endeavoring to directly teach cooperation, assertion, responsibility, empathy, self-regulation, and self-awareness, and believing that what we are teaching children about themselves and about each other in the course of both these proactive teachings and then also responding when they've made mistakes, that the beliefs we're building up are just as important as other kinds of concepts and skills that we teach. We also talked about how when children err, we can emphasize what can be learned and how they can make it better, both with their peers and with adults in their community. And we shared a range of key instructional practices or strategies of what this looks like in the classroom. As a form of feedback for us, we would love to know, as we plan future family ed events, what is a topic that you are most curious to learn more about, whether it was something we brought up directly in this presentation or something that we didn't, that you were hoping to hear about. And then we'd also love to start to take questions if anyone has questions. We're a small enough group, I think we can just, you're welcome to type your question in the chat or to just unmute and share your question aloud.
Hi, I'll just talk. Thank you, everybody. What a great, seconding what Rita said, great team you have. I think it would be helpful to, in the future, have maybe a lower school focused parent ed and middle school parent ed, and also to give us a little bit more insight on Ms. Hale's role as it's new this year and sort of how she plays into the team. And but yeah, I think this was an awesome overview, and then maybe having more upper lower specific topics, and you can really dive into kind of what you just did at the end for middle school students. But thank you.
That's super helpful, Melanie. Thanks for that feedback. And I see Rita is agreeing with you.
Thank you so much for putting this together. This was really, really helpful. And I was wondering, this is not related to the subject, but you asked if there is something else that would be very helpful. If there was something around the expectations setting and reward. So what I mean by that is when you, when your child does something and you're like, this is great, but you know that they're capable of doing more, right? You don't want to discourage them. You don't want to say, oh, this is really amazing, because you know that they can do more. And what is that like good enough type of area where you can push without discouragement, without too much praise? Like that balance is very interesting and challenging sometimes. So I'd love to learn more about that if possible.
That's super helpful. Yeah, certainly what you're describing as a parent, the similar kind of dynamic happens at school. When do you extend and sort of challenge further while still honoring that good work is being done? Does anybody want to speak to that just briefly? And then I think I hear what you're saying is it would be helpful to have a longer session where we could talk more about that.
I think when we offer praise to kids, we want to focus on the effort that we see and what we observe in their behavior rather than on the outcome. So instead of like, wow, I love this writing that you did. There's so many sentences and they're so clear. We would say like, gosh, you put in so much effort. I saw how hard you were working, or it was really hard to get started. And I love how you pushed through, right? So we sort of focus on the behavior instead of the outcome. You can always then follow up with, I wonder what would have happened if you'd worked for 10 more minutes, right? Or I wonder what would have happened if you'd practiced for 30 minutes, because wow, what a great job you did without the practice, right? So we can always sort of add that in at the end, but focusing on the effort rather than the outcome would be my quick response. We could talk about this for a while.
I was going to offer the same I wonder tip, Jenna. It's a classic teacher move. Yeah. So that would be a good tip. And then also the praise, a lot of the literature on praise, and there's a lot, is it says that it's most growth oriented when it's really specific as well. So you shouldn't shy away from phrasing, but make sure that it's specific so that kids can learn from it. And if you are ever just feeling, sometimes I feel like it's more like my emotional need as a parent to give a reward than it is my kids' need to receive a reward. If you're ever feeling in a rewardy mood, a lot of research suggests that when that's a surprise and not like the expectation for a job well done, that's when kids are least likely to internalize that as kind of like an extrinsic motivator.
And we'll capture that request for a future parent ed event. I think that would be super interesting to discuss.